Okay, so Tyler Sweat. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the accessible media specialist here at the Iowa Library for the Blind. We are going to be doing, we've been talking a lot, at least when I've been running these, a lot about different types of technology, and we're going to kind of review some of those again.
Hey, Tyler.
Yeah.
I'll just jump in here to say that we're seeing your slides on presentation mode, not on
Why did it jump to the other screen?
I know this is not the first time Zoom has done this to me this week. I wonder if it's a common, they've got a bug somewhere.
Well, I unplugged my other monitor, so we'll see if that,
do it too.
See if that should automatically fix the issue. So there we go.
Yep. Perfect.
All right. Good deal. Thank you. Okay. Back what I was saying. Talking a lot about specific things. So I talked about screen readers and how to use them in your library and other things. Today it's going to be a lot broader, and it's going to be about the technology that you have in your library and just kind of walking through some of those things that you guys already have that you might not be aware of and how to utilize those. And also a big chunk will be when you are purchasing new technology for your library or new services, how you bring up accessibility and how you talk about what accessibility looks like with these services that you'll be providing for your patrons. So there's only two of us here. You got Leslie Heinzler, who's hanging out in the background today. And then me. Denise is doing our youth program upstairs right now, and Sarah's on vacation. So about our library, for those of you that don't know, we provide books and other materials in alternative formats to all Iowa residents of all ages who are unable to read standard print material. So this is our eligibility down here. And while I'm on this slide, we do have a couple things that we were going to announce. So for the library conference and the state conference in the fall, we are doing a pre-conference event at our library. We're going to have a bunch of talks and some other things going on that day. I think it's in the afternoon is when everything kind of kicks off. So we're doing that during the morning-ish, I guess you could say, to like little after lunch. We're gonna have more information once we start getting everything nailed down, but it should be in there as far as something to sign up for if you're interested. And then the other thing that Sarah wanted me to mention is that we are doing a course called Braille Bits, which is just learning Braille and just kind of running through a program that we've built here and working with the ILA that we're going to do continuing ed credits for that program. And so that's going to be released this fall as well. So just kind of keep you guys aware and looking for those programs and the pre-conference that we will be doing. So today, biggest thing, talking about what accessibility is, a lot of the tech you already have, keys to purchasing screen readers, accessible apps, and then how to test your tech. So before we get started with any of this, I think we just need to go over sort of accessibility and what I mean by that word when we're talking about libraries. So accessibility, the practice of making your library usable by as many people as possible. So this includes every program, every service that you do. What you're trying to do is the biggest thing when we think about accessibility is you're trying to reach those people on the edge of your spectrum. So if you have a spectrum of all your patrons and abilities, that you're trying to reach those people on either edge of that. Because if you can reach those people on the fringe, you're going to allow everybody to use the programs. A really good example of universal design with accessibility. So something that was designed for the fringe, but everybody uses, is a curb cutout. So the curb cutout, I talked about it in a previous thing, so I'm not going to dive in too much. But you think of a curb cutout, it was made for people in a wheelchair to get across the street, but people with strollers can also use it. And normal people, or not people without disabilities, can just use it as well. So that's the other thing to think about, is that it was made for the fringe, but everybody can use it. And small changes can have a huge impact. So just like that, you cut out part of the curb and make a ramp there, and boom, huge impact. So that's when we talk about accessibility, that's the main thing that I'm focusing on today. All right. And feel free to ask questions. So feel free to ask questions throughout this, and Leslie will be checking questions, or I'll be checking questions, and I'll just make sure I get time, just because I want to make sure that I get everybody's answers to you. So let's start with accessible tech that you already have. I think a lot of times with accessibility is that people think they need to purchase something new or they need to get something else in their library that's a specific tool, when I think you guys already have a lot of tools that you can use. It's just understanding the process of using them. So starting with iPads or tablets. So all iPads or even Android tablets have built-in accessibility modes. So on iPads, VoiceOver is your screen reader. There's also TalkBack on any Android tablet. And so those are your screen readers that exist that they can navigate and get around using a voice telling them where they're at and just kind of navigating with that voice. They also have built-in magnification and contrast. So changing contrast and colors, changing size of apps. And then also there's already apps that are out there that exist as far as being accessible. And the further we go, a lot of the apps are becoming more accessible the further that technology is going that route. So that's another nice thing to see, is that a lot more it's becoming much more standard. And then as far as the Plow websites, I know not all libraries use this, but as far as the websites with the Plow, what I found is most of them are pretty accessible with the screen reader, which is really exciting. Because I think a lot of you guys are using that Plow system. What is it? Public libraries on the web? Is that it? I think so. You have to let me know if that's right. I'm pretty sure that's what
I believe you are correct on that.
Okay,
Tyler.
good deal. Yeah, because I was kind of playing around with it a couple weeks ago, and yeah, it seems like most of them are pretty good, just because that format is pretty basic, and a lot of times when you have some basic like that, it works really well. And one thing that a lot of people don't think about is audiobooks. I mean, technically, it's making it accessible. It's taking a book and allowing someone who can't read standard print to listen to the book. I think it's one that you guys don't think about all the time, but it is something. If you have those available, boom. I mean, that's technically an accessible tech. And then computers. So just kind of like with the iPads or tablets, the computers have a lot of different things that are already built into them. So size of content, tinting to the screen. So there's different things that you can get for the screen to kind of help with that. Or you can also set it up yourself. Setting the contents of the screen to appear in monochrome. So that's a setting where it just changes the contrast completely to help somebody. You can always invert brightness, eliminate screen glare, and also speak out loud screen content, which we'll kind of get into a little bit later. But a lot of these things are already built into computers, especially with Windows. So if you go to like the search bar in any Windows computer and you just type in magnifier, and it'll pop up with a magnifier, you click enter and it zooms in. And so then you can change those settings to how much you want it to zoom in. And then you can pan around the screen to use the computer. So I think just being aware of what you guys already have and just sort of making sure you understand how to use them, and just, kind of figuring out the accessible tech and how to get it on, I think makes a huge difference from a starting point. Because the last thing you want is someone to come in to try to use it and, that they hit this barrier of not being able to use your computer when it's the staff that doesn't quite know how to do it versus it not being on the computer. So that's just something to be aware of. And I just wanted to go over that first. Now, when we talk about purchasing, so specifically like purchasing accessible material or accessible services, the first thing that people that they do is asking if something is accessible. So we run into that a lot here because that's always like our number one question. So when we get a new program, it's like, is this accessible? And a lot of times the answer that you get doesn't tell you if it's accessible or not. What a company will do is they try to meet the guidelines. And so that's WCAG. And so these are web guidelines for accessibility. And they'll say they're WCAG compliant, right? And so what that means is there's a checklist of things that they need to go through in order to make something accessible. So it's things like making sure that contrast is at a certain ratio, or it's making sure that the links are, correctly made. And so when a company says that doesn't always mean it's accessible. That's a good start, that at least they know what that means and they sort of talked about it. But once you get onto a patron side, it might not work as well as they say it will with the screen reader. Because I've been on sites and other things where, it's WCAG compliant, but then it doesn't work at all with the screen reader, or it doesn't work the way it should. And so it's just understanding that while that's a good start, you need to kind of dive a little deeper. So the things that I like to see from places that I'm purchasing technology or purchasing services from is that they have somebody on their team that's like an accessible specialist. Because that instead of having just one of their IT guys or one of their people just like ran it through a website and said that it was WK compliant, you have someone that you can sort of bounce ideas off of or ask deeper questions, so they can talk to a little bit more about accessibility and how it's used. I also like anytime they have user tested or any reviews that you can find out about it. Now, one of the things that we always do when we're getting a new program is that we try to see if other libraries are using that service or product, especially with libraries for the blind. If we can get who else that's like us has purchased this, I think that's a really good starting point, because then you can go to them and say, hey, I'm Tyler from the Iowa Library for the Blind. I see you guys got this program. How well does it work for you? How well does it work for your patrons? Just to kind of give an idea of what they like and don't like about it. And we've really benefited from that, just to kind of get an idea of people that are like, libraries that are like us that use it, just because then we can get that feedback separate from that company and can really figure out if it's something. Because there's been times that we found another library for the blind that was using it and they didn't like it very much, or they felt that it was missing the things that we're looking for in that product from an accessibility standpoint. So I think that that's really important to kind of to make sure that you can find other people using that service or product. And always ask for a trial period, even if it's not offered. I think that, when you're making purchases for new services and products, you could be spending a lot of money on it, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to give you a trial period. A lot of times, they do, but just giving a chance to test it out, even if they're like, well, we can give you a version of it and jump on Zoom with us and talk us through, even those moments will kind of give you an opportunity to play around with it. And so I think that that's just another good question to ask. All these companies that are making these products for the public library system, I haven't run into anyone that gets super offended when I tell them that it's not super accessible or can we change this and this. I think sometimes that it's things that they haven't thought about. But overall, I think it's a great learning opportunity to kind of for their product to look better, and to work better. And so that's the thing. Anytime that you can give feedback or you can kind of, check it out. Now, testing it yourself, I understand that sounds pretty scary when you're not from an accessible background. And we'll kind of walk through some of the things that you can do just to kind of give it a run. But pretty much the biggest thing you want to do is just kind of get a feel for it and if it's going to work for you guys, and finding other libraries that are using that. So screen readers is one thing I talked about on April 28th. Now, Samantha, the recordings for the other ones they live somewhere, correct?
They do. I'll grab the link for the screen readers one and throw it into the chat here.
Okay, so that's a really good one to take a peek at if you weren't here for that one, because I do a pretty deep dive into the different types of screen readers and how to use them effectively in your library. I think screen readers is something that it gets scary if you are new to it. And so the one that I always recommend for libraries is NVDA, so non-visual desktop access, because it's free. And so that's a great place to start. And it's pretty easy to pick up on the basic uses of it. And so that's why it's one that I recommend. It can be placed on a USB stick. So it doesn't have to be on all your computers. You could literally have, you could just have it on a USB stick ready to go. And then, the person could use it as they see fit. And there's a lot of customized settings and other things that you can change. One thing that I think that I like with NVDA for someone that's new to screen readers or someone that has low vision but is still wanting to use a mouse rather than to learn all the key commands is that you can set it up where even as the mouse goes over like icons and other things, it'll just read what you're on. So I think that's a really big beneficial thing. So the question in the chat, do you need to load NVDA on desktop or put it on each web browser on computer? So that's where you can use it on a USB stick. So it's just a normal program, and then you can just run it. You can open it there, or it could be on the desktop. Either way, it works. Because once it's on the desktop, you start it up, and then it will read those things like Chrome, Fox, Edge. It'll read everything on the computer. So that's the nice part about NVDA. And I talked a lot about, we talked about iPads earlier. We're talking about technology you guys already have. And so VoiceOver is the one on iPads, and just understanding screen readers and how they work on that, I think makes a big difference, just because just playing around with it, I think is the best way. So with iPhones, instead of thinking it like a mouse or keypads, it's just swipes and it'll read it to you as you go through. So that's the nice thing about, VoiceOver, is that I think the commands are a little easier to learn from the start as far as figuring out how to get going. So that's another one that just play around with it and just get used to using it. Just so if somebody does come in and they have it on a different device or something, you can turn it on for them, or at least if you, let's say that someone comes in, a student comes in and they already know how to get VoiceOver on the iPad and they've been playing around with it, how to turn it back off. So you know where to go. You just don't get it, that doesn't become the VoiceOver iPad because you can't figure out how to turn it off. So it's those little things that I think could make a difference when you're using your technology with that. So accessible apps and settings. So these are just some of the apps that I really like as far as Apple and Android, as from an accessibility standpoint. And I think that you should definitely download these apps if you don't already have them on there, because I think that these apps are just really fun ones that work really well. So Seeing AI is a free app from Google. Now, this app is one of the coolest apps from that I've found from an accessibility standpoint. So there's a lot of different settings, from reading handwriting. So you could take a picture of handwriting and it'll tell you what it says. It does short text. So you could hold it over a note card, a business card or something, and it'll read it to you. You also can scan full documents. So you can line the camera up over the document. It'll process it and read the whole page directly from the app. So you don't even have to have a screen reader on, and it'll read what's on there, which is pretty incredible. And there's also a currency reader. What else? There's color. So you can hold it up and it'll tell you what color things are around you. It can read faces and tell you how many people are in the room with you. It's pretty incredible, all of the things that it does. And it's completely free. So that's one that I really like, just from it's just cool, all of the things that it can really do. And then Audio Game Hub is another one. And this is like just a series. It's like 7 or 8 games on there that are all accessible. So they use a lot of tones and other things to make them accessible. So there's like archery, where the tone changes when it gets closer to the bullseye, and then you have to release your finger to hit the target. There's some other games that are on there that all use audio. So that's kind of cool. They're all audio games to play with. So that's just another really fun one that I like. The question of who developed the Seeing AI app, and that is Google. So Google came up with that one. And then TapTapSee. This one has some ads in it, but it's a good one for just figuring out some basic uses, because it allows you to take pictures of things and then it'll scan it and tell you what it is. So that's, and that one's used a lot of times to, in cooking, to kind of tell what kind of can of soup you have in front of you, or if it's the can of tomatoes, or, what box of cereal and those types of things. But it has a lot of different uses. Now I put the Google apps down here in Android, but they could also go under Apple. So the docs, the sheets, presentations, etc., those apps are all accessible and work very well with VoiceOver or the screen readers that are built in. So I think it's just sort of being aware of what is out there. The technology is getting a lot better. When you have things like Seeing AI with Google, which has really come a long way as far as showing what can be done. I think that technology is going to start to bleed into other apps to make them more accessible and to make them more useful. So that's why I really like seeing something like that. Now, when we talk about settings, this goes for tablets or computers. I've talked a little bit about it, but contrast, screen readers, magnification, color, size of apps, all this stuff can be changed. So the other thing to think about, that when we talk about accessible is if you could set this stuff up to where your apps on all your iPads are already bigger and the text is already bigger, because the patron that, that can see fine is going to come in and they're going to be able and can use the iPad. They're going to come in and it's not going to bother them if they're using it. Right. But then you have a patron that comes in with a motor disability or has low vision, that's where it's already going to be built for a little bit bigger size and just sort of help them be able to use it. So that's something to think about, is just getting this stuff set up ahead of time, even just to make sure. All right. So question is, do the patrons know what they need an item in terms of contrast, or is different type of users that need different settings? Yeah. So that's the thing with when we talk about contrast and some other things, that is going to vary between patron to patron. So the biggest thing with like color contrast is a lot of times, it's that monochrome where they can't, if your background is really squiggly or it's a lot of colors and stuff, that might throw them off with their vision. And so that's where just having like basic colors like black and white, for example, is a really good contrast setting, because you're going to be able to read the text if it's black on a white background. So it's just kind of making sure that those things are set up correctly, where you have the greatest sort of contrast difference. And I'm going to show you guys some tools and other things that I use to kind of help with contrast here in a minute. So then I think I'm going to stop here and pull up some of the tools. While I'm getting the other websites set up, if you guys had any questions, let me know. Because I'm going to kind of dive into some of the resources that I use. Let me see, where is that? So there's a few different websites that I really like as far as testing. And a few of them are websites that really do a good job of just sort of telling you what's wrong with the website, or kind of where where the website is. And you don't have to necessarily understand everything that's going on with what the alert is. You just need to know, like, oh, clearly this isn't working. Like, so that's the one thing to look at from that. I want to find the contrast one quick. I think it might be here. Yeah, WebAIM. All right. Let's go back to here. All right. So no questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. So this is the WCAG guidelines. I just wanted to kind of show you. I'm not going to dive into all of these. But the big things they call is POUR. So POUR. So perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Those are the four foundations of what WCAG means. And so that's things like the first one, if perceivable, is provide text alternatives for non-text context so it can be changed into other forms people need. And so, so that's kind of the big one under that, but each of them have their own thing that everything kind of falls under. So if you really want to do a deep dive into these sort of guidelines, knock yourself out. You could go for days and kind of figuring it out. But when you're built, so let's say you're going to go back into your Plow website. pour and plow, right? You're going to go back into your plow website and change some things up. If you really, these are kind of some of the things that you want to think about when doing it. Like operable, one of the things that seems basic, but do not design content in a way that is known to cause seizures, right? So that you don't want a bunch of flashing lights and bunch of, noises coming out of your website. I always equate it back to, it was like in the 90s when websites first came out, where everybody wanted like the typewriter text to come across the screen and it go ta 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 ta, and there was always like on either side of text, it was always like, like red sirens flashing, like little like emoji red sirens, and just like that's what everybody had on their websites, right when it kind of opened up. And so just don't do that. There's a lot better options out there now. But that's kind of, it always makes me laugh where we've come from as far as like what websites used to look like back at the start and what kind of we're building them into now. So yeah, but this is w3.org, which talks a lot about WCAG and how to make web content more accessible. WCAG applies specifically to web content, but I think that it's good for a lot of different other things to kind of take that and run with it. So then the other one I wanted to show you guys real quick is the contrast checker. Now this is from WebAIM. This is webaim.org, which is just a great accessibility website as far as just getting resources from. And this is, I use this one a bunch before. It's really nice when you're putting together something on your website, or even if you're trying to build a flyer, because you can literally take any color you want and you can change background colors and other things, and it'll tell you if it passes or not. So if you look here, so WCAG AA and AAA. So so that's basically means AAA is a higher standard than that. So this is your normal text, this is your large text, and this would be like a text input. So you see they all fail because our contrast is not that much. So that's just something to kind of play around with, and just try to see if you can make it better, because even that looks awful, right? So then if we go back to white, then it still fails because that green is just not there yet. So that's where just understanding the different things. So now black and white, obviously that's going to pass, and there's a bunch of combinations that do pass. It's just to understand the differences on this. So the ratio you're going for, it kind of talks about the explanation down here, but for that normal text is 7:1. And then for large text, it's 4.5:1. So if you look, black to white is 18.42. So there is a lot of range from black and white to other things that you can make it, because as I get the text whiter, that's what makes the difference. Or if I make that background a little grayer, even, it still will pass like the AA, but not the AAA for WCAG. So I think it's just a really good resource to use. So the other thing that they have here really are the popular resources. They have a checklist, if you want to dive into that, and they talk a lot more about WCAG, and they split it up pretty easily as well to kind of make sure that you're doing things correctly with any web content that you're putting out there. But like I talked about, when you're purchasing new equipment or new website, programs that you guys are using, this will be something that they'll bring up saying that they're WCAG compliant, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to be a fully accessible thing. So that's just something to think about. Or the problems we run into sometimes would be like their website is WCAG compliant and it's accessible, but their app isn't. And so that was an issue for us for a program that we were looking at getting, because yes, our patrons could use the program on a computer. Not all of our patrons have access to computers. Much more of them have access to a smartphone that could download apps. And so that's something to really dive into, is just more than just the website, is also for the apps, because patrons couldn't get past the login screen. Because I tried, I couldn't get past the login screen using a screen reader. It was impossible. So that, just those little things to think about can make a huge difference in the long run in making sure you're meeting the needs of your patrons. There's one more thing that I wanted to show you guys, and I'll see if I know I linked it and I don't know what happened to it. Oh, Lighthouse stuff. So Lighthouse is an add-on that you can do for Google Chrome. And so this one is just like if you want to check your own website for accessibility, or you want to check someone else's and those things, you can add it on as an extension. And all you have to do is when you're on the website, so I'm on blind.iowa.gov, and our site is old, and so it's going to come up with a few different things, but usually it's pretty good as far as accessibility. But it just creates a quick little report that kind of tells you where you're at. And you don't, like I kind of talked about earlier, you don't have to understand everything that's going on with your accessibility report, but it's a starting point to be like, oh, we got a lot of errors, and we need assistance to kind of to figure out how to make this better. So that's the one thing that I really like about Lighthouse, is the way they spell it out for you is pretty easy. So once this comes up, I'll kind of walk you through what it looks like. All right. So it has like performance, best practice SEO, things you don't need to worry about. Accessibility is the big one. So if you go down here, accessibility 92, right? So we only have a few different things that are showing up, and they really do a good job of talking you through like how to fix it. And they even show you like where it is. So their biggest issue is that the contrast on these buttons is not the best. We are in the process of working on a new website. But yeah, so it's just little things like that just to make it more. And then some other weird things when it jumps into headings and H4s and those things that they're not in the right order. And then this one's like super code that HTML element does not have a lang attribute. So this is like super text stuff that it just is labeling. But yeah, so I mean, but I think for some of the basic stuff like contrast, and that's a really good one for you guys to kind of check out. And then navigation, if you know how to change things in the heading elements that are going on with that, I think it cleans up a lot of your pages if you can fix those two things. So again, that's Lighthouse, and that is a Chrome. You just go to the Chrome, store and just download that for free. And it's through Chrome DevTools. It's built by Google Chrome. So it's just a great place to kind of check out where you're at, or even going to something that you're looking at getting and just running that test and being like, oh, we have all these errors and issues. So I don't know if we really want to spend this much money on something that clearly isn't working for us. And so I think that's something to think about with that. So let's jump back over to the PowerPoint again. So question in there was, is there a screen reader for PDFs on plow sites? So PDFs are something that are accessible and not accessible at the same time. So if you take a Word document that is accessible and everything is built correctly, and you turn that into a PDF, it's going to be accessible, and a screen reader that's already on the computer or on the iPhone or on the tablet is going to be able to read it. But if your PDF is a picture, so you scanned it and then uploaded it as a PDF, a screen reader is not going to be able to pull any of the information on that. So that's the biggest thing with PDFs, is just making sure that it's originally a Word document that you can then transfer over into a PDF, making it accessible. And I think I talked about that in one of the earlier webinars, and I think I talked about accessibility. They all blend together at this point with the amount of accessibility stuff that I've been giving. But yeah. And Samantha did post something about a webinar they did about accessibility concerns on the new plow sites. So I don't know, can you give me a quick overview of that? I'll definitely watch that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was done by Marie Harms, who is sort of our technology director in a lot of ways. She's been instrumental in getting the plow sites up and running for folks. And so her focus in this webinar was on how to specifically implement some of the things you're talking about here, like headers and,
Mhm.
correct formatting of
Awesome.
your site, and having things like descriptive text to go with images and that kind of thing, and how, best practices for links and all of that. So I would encourage folks to check that out if you have specific sites about your plow site as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think a lot of times with a plow based template, it's not the template that's inaccessible. It's what you're putting on to the plow site that's inaccessible, kind of like a PDF that's a scanned document. And it's just understanding that if you just build it right the first time, that it'll be accessible and everybody can use it, and just kind of making sure that those details are really put in place. So that would be a great webinar to check out. So yeah, thank you, Samantha, for bringing that up. All right, now let's go back to PowerPoint. So as far as, we're going to kind of reiterate some of the other things, but I wanted to kind of just talk about it again as far as testing the technology that you have. So that's just playing around with it. I think just kind of exploring on your own, and just kind of learning is the best way to do it. Because if you can get yourself into a problem where you're like, I'm stuck on this app, or I'm stuck in this part of the computer, how do I get out of it? That can kind of help you troubleshoot when a patron's having an issue with it, or understanding the screen reader, how to quit out of it and start over again. Those types of things, I think are just important to play around with. That's a lot how I figure a lot of things out, is just getting my hands on it and just messing around. So exploring the settings, the uses, other things like that. So I know I keep going back to iPads, but just like going to the magnifier and playing with the different settings, and kind of zooming around so you kind of know how it works. And then, once you guys feel comfortable with it, just promoting the features and different things that you have to your patrons. So if you have, NVDA on your computers, or you have a USB drive with NVDA, just sort of letting them know that you have access to screen readers and other accessible technology that they could then, use when they come into your library, just so that they feel welcome. As far as they feel welcome, and making sure that, that you have the technology that, that they can use to help them out. And, the other thing, if you do have patrons that come in that already are using accessibility features, just listening to them on what they use, because then you can kind of keep track of what you guys need for the future. So if you notice that, patrons are coming in and they're always using a certain contrast, or they're coming in and they're always using a specific screen reader over another one, it's just those types of things to make sure that you can listen to them, just to figure out what they're using. So I think that's just a really important thing when it comes to testing your technology. And just, there's a lot more of those resources out, like with WebAIM that I showed you guys, with contrast checkers, and as far as other things that can really help sort of get you guys on the track of becoming more accessible, and really meeting those needs of your patrons, which I think is the most important when we come to that. So if you guys do have, I'm going to throw my email in the chat as well. I'll throw my email and phone number in the chat as well. And so if you guys have like specific accessibility questions, like you're like, hey, I'm struggling with this one thing, always feel free to reach out to me. Because I can always help kind of walk you through, give you a resource that you need to kind of help with accessibility. It's part of my, job. It's in my title. So I'm always willing to talk about accessibility and how I can make the world a slightly more accessible. So I think that that's just a good thing to talk about. We do have a few time for some questions if you guys have anything else. So I'll give you a couple more minutes for that, and then I want to show off like one more resource to you guys, and then we'll go from there. So.
Someone is asking about the Plow website training, accessibility training. Yes, that is in Iowa Learns. I think I put the link in the chat. I will repost that. The other thing I want to say, which I just think is so important, is, you put these on you put some of these apps on your library devices, and this is a great educational tool and opportunity as well. So even someone who's not needing them for accessibility reasons can pick up that iPad and learn a little bit about what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, who does need those tools. And so I think that that's a really important sort of patron education aspect. And I think like, I want to go download this Seeing AI app. I mean, that just sounds so like, just like hold it up to a
really
pile
cool
of bananas and learn, those bananas are yellow, or, just to see. I just think what a tool that would be. I know the word AI, the phrase AI is very loaded, and I'm sure it has difficulties, but I think that would be an amazing tool to have.
It really doesn't have as many.
Folks.
It really doesn't have as many difficulties as you would think either. Like with handwriting, so my handwriting is chicken scratches. And I've written, like, you can write really short notes. Like I just wrote down some like animals, and it would read off and be like cow, pig, horse. Like it was crazy with how well it was with handwriting.
So I think, a friend of mine who's an older lady whose husband was in the nursing home with Parkinson's, and she was losing her voice, or she had a cold or something. And so with what she would do is like text to speech with him a lot. So she would speak into a phone that could be amplified so he could hear her.
Yep.
But when she was losing her voice, like it couldn't even pick her up enough. But if she could write a message and have that be, read aloud, I just think that there's so many applications for technology like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just posted 3 links into the chat. One is the contrast checker from WebAIM. The next one is the WCAG kind of walkthrough and content. And then the last one is one I haven't showed you guys yet. And so what that is, it is a quick reference guide for NVDA on Windows. It kind of talks to you. There's a link to download NVDA and just kind of some basic commands, because there is a lot of commands that goes along with it. And so that's the one that I think is a lot more confusing for people to get started. If you're really like, if you don't know a whole lot about it. And so that's where, because, you can just use the arrow keys to navigate, but there's a lot more that goes on with it. So that's just a quick guide to kind of show off some of the things that go with NVDA. Oh, did I just post a panelist? Oops. You think I haven't been using Zoom for a year straight? You think I would know to change it to panelist and attendees? So, so let's try that again.
I got it, Tyler.
Yeah, you got it. You're a panelist though. That's why.
Yeah. No, but I'm just posting them to everybody.
Oh, okay, sweet. Well, I just did too. I don't know if it made it all one big link. No, it worked. Okay, sweet. All right, there we go. Now you have 1,000 links. So, all right. Any other questions? And I know I already said it, but I think the big takeaway is just understanding that a lot of times it's the content you're putting up on the website, or you're, adding to something that can kind of get you in trouble with it being inaccessible. And so that's just always something to think about, that, while sometimes it definitely is the platform, once you get past that, then usually it's the content that's being placed on the platform. It's something that I've been reiterating a lot with online education in the past year, where Blackboard and Google Classroom and some other things that they've been using in the schools, they're accessible, but I think it's what the teachers have been putting up that can sometimes lead them to not be as accessible as they need them to be.
I do have a question for you too, Tyler. This is Sam again.
Yeah. So
I think sometimes when you're talking about examples of especially web technology, some of the words you're saying, high contrast, et cetera, these to me make me feel like my website can't be beautiful. Can you offer a word of encouragement to say, like, your website can be pretty and accessible, or, can you give it maybe an example, if you have one off the top of your head, of a website that's like well designed and still and pretty to look at and accessible? Yours obviously is all of those things.
Yeah, no, ours is Ours is old, but it still works. Yeah, so I think that is a big thing that people run into. They're like, well, everything has to be black and white, and I can't add anything in there to make it look pretty anymore. When I looked at that contrast compare, you saw that black and white was a 18.4 to 1 ratio, which is way, way, way higher than what you actually would need to still be considered WCAG compliant. But the other thing that, a lot of times when you start talking about putting images and adding alt text and those things on websites, you can put pictures up all you want and tag them with alt text, kind of explaining what they are. But you also can just put things up off to the side of text, and the alt text can be decorative. That's all it has to say. So it doesn't add anything to the website for someone who's blind. So as they're using a screen reader and they came across a decorative picture, so like a vine going down the side of your page, Jack, you could just say decorative. Then they could skip over it because it's not going to give them any more information about what's going on the page. And so that's the thing where I think as long as you're building it correctly and the contrast is within that range, you can still make it look nice and look pretty without losing any of the information or keeping access from anybody. So that is a good question.
One main thing to know is have all the pictures you want, just don't have the pictures be carrying vital pieces of information.
Well, yeah, but if you do, that's where you just come into alt text and adding those descriptions of what the picture is.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want is something that adds a lot to whatever you have on your page, and it just says picture when the screen reader goes over it. So that's the thing when you go from that aspect. So. Oh, and one other thing, as far as like another just soapboxy thing, QR codes are never really accessible. Just because just because a lot of times finding them, right? So if it's either it doesn't work with the screen reader unless there's a link as the alt text. But even like on a poster, it's not really accessible because finding it on there or scanning it doesn't always work out. So we try to frown on those, rather have just a link put into your web page rather than a QR code or something like that. So
yeah, that would be I imagine the QR code comes up more in print media. I don't see them a ton in digital spaces.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So maybe an alternative, scan this QR code or visit this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
URL.
You could do both. Absolutely. Yep. That would work great. So.
Well, wonderful. I haven't seen any other questions pop through unless Leslie has caught any that I've missed.
I think we got all of them. Just trying to think. What's the next one?
Oh, I just was looking at it.
It's stuck with me again. We're doing universal design and learning and libraries.
There it is. I am so excited about universal design. I think that's going to be a great one. And then I need to touch base with Sarah because I believe I need to get a few more back in the catalog. After we've got September's available to register for, and I will grab that link now. Or August, excuse me.
August, yep. And then September is community outreach and PR.
Oh, great.
And then Wednesday, October 27th is Braille. And then November 24th is youth programming.
Oh, yes.
And then our last one will be on December 22nd, and that's youth and STEM.
So Denise is going to bring us home at the end of the year, I imagine, huh?
Yeah, with me thrown in there for
Denise and Tyler. Excellent.
Yeah, for the rest of them, I think. So, yeah, absolutely.
I put the link to the UDL, which stands for Universal Design and Learning. Is that right, Tyler?
Yeah, for learning.
For the Universal Design for Learning into the
Yes.
chat, so folks can register for that.
Yeah, so that one takes like a broader approach to kind of what we talked about today. Well, accessibility talks about specific things. Universal design is sort of the giant umbrella that goes over everything. So,
yeah. I think that will be an important program. We'll see what our education system is looking like this fall, and how we can be supports to our communities in that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tyler, and thank you, Leslie. Thanks everyone for being here today. Tyler, you'll send me your slides, I imagine.
Yep.
So folks have some of those links, and we will get those sent out to folks along with an invitation to take the evaluation for CE credit. So thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Leslie, and thank you everyone for being here. Have a
Yep.
great
Thanks,
rest
guys.
of your day.
See you next month.
See you next month.